Hey there guys, how you doing? My name is Mikey and welcome to the first review video on megamegaminis. Now this is a beginner's look at Warhammer, so where better to start than the Getting Started with Warhammer 40,000 book. This is available for £10 on the Games Workshop website, and really we're going to take a look through this, just have a quick skim through what's in here, what are my thoughts from a beginner's perspective, and try to answer probably the main question. If you know nothing about Games Workshop and you want to get into it, is this the place to start? Or can you save yourself a tenner by just watching a whole load of YouTube videos, which are going to give you a bit of insight into the lore and the game overall? So the first thing you're actually going to notice on this is that there's a plastic sprue on the front which contains a couple of miniatures, and although they can be a little bit fiddly to pop out by hand, I do recommend some kind of clippers. You end up with these very small but very detailed models. We've got a Necron warrior here and a Space Marine over here, and it really does hit home immediately just exactly what you're going to be having your hands on. They are very small but highly detailed plastic figurines, and if you're used to watching a lot of YouTube videos on a large monitor, you might kind of be forgiven for thinking they're going to be much bigger and easier to paint, but immediately it hits home that you are going to want to build up some skill if you're going to get into the painting side of this hobby. So the first thing I noticed with this is that it's really glossy, very nice, and on the back we've got these high-res pictures of all the miniatures in a tabletop area. They look really cool, and again, this is probably how you can be putting your models together, and it gives you a little bit of an idea of the dark future of the 41st millennium. And across the front, again, some more artwork. Space Marine going shoulder to shoulder with a Necron warrior, just like those figures, gives you an idea of the battle being up close and personal. So inside we've got a breakdown of what's going on here. It's split into the hobby. It tells you a little bit about the era of Warhammer 40k, the miniatures, the scene, playing games, and what else you can buy. And it gives you a breakdown of how to put the miniatures together that you get in those sprue. And again, I just want to pop in here a really evocative piece of artwork. All this green glowing energy, this relentless march of the Necrons. They really feel like they're coming out of their time tombs. They're sort of like T-800 Terminator models, but they've got this kind of really grim, relentless energy, like the Shrike zombie cyborgs from his Mortal Engines as well. Then over here, it starts to give you an idea of a hobby. You collect things, you build things, you put all this stuff together, you think about the grim nature of mankind. You can paint them with these very simple guides and start off simple and bring things to life. And also you can play them on the tabletop games. So there's loads of different ways that you can approach the hobby. You're in it for the painting, you're in it for the collecting, or you're in it for the actual tabletop battles. And then it starts to give us this lovely breakdown of the Era Indomitus, which, as far as I'm aware, is a kind of new thing that's happened over the last 4 years, involving a new wave of Space Marines. I have played a bit of Warhammer in the 90s, so I have super vague, out-of-date memories as to what this is all about, but I can see here that things have only gotten worse in the far future. And you'll notice that the whole of this magazine is very glossy, very nice printing, very visual. The whole idea is to be really evocative and get you interested in the hobby as well. And a lot of the artwork and the scale of the combat and the battles, I've noticed, is at the human level. It's at the front lines of the trenches. So, a bit about collecting your miniatures and forging your collection. Do you want to pick a particular army because you're really into the lore behind them? You love the story of these undead plague marines, or you love the beautiful honesty of the ultramarines? Maybe you want it because you want a tactically advantageous army on a battlefield, or maybe you just want to paint stuff because it looks really cool, which is probably where I'm falling into, the cool shit crew. And then we're going to get a bit of an overview of the core armies. Space Marines, mankind's post-human brightest future. These guys are the hardcore element. They are here to actually be the ultimate human weapon, bursting forward throughout the galaxy. And we've got more beautiful, sumptuous artwork. Now, because I come from the 90s, when I last remember being interested, in my day, everything had these good boy green flock bases. Everything was just very nice and very bright, whereas now everything's gone a bit grayer and darker. All the lighting to all of this artwork and painting is really just kind of rich, but also very dark in tones. Then we've got the Legions of Chaos, because people like to travel around using the warp. This is the post-pinnacle era of human society by the sounds of things. So although we traveled through space, unfortunately space itself and the warp and the other existing worlds became conscious and formed dark gods, and they're kind of corrupting everybody. So you can be a good boy, or you can be a bad boy, or you can be many things in between. And then we've got these different corrupt legions. We've got Alpha Legions who do stealth and misrule, Zenich who have like wisdom but trickery, Nurgle and all of their gooey boys. Again, so many different kind of paint schemes and things to get into. Also, if you like hot babes with swords and guns, Adepta Sororitas, they literally have a saint on their side, and it looks like they are super religious, burning heathens and cleansing lots of stuff. We've got more of these ladies with their full-on priest-level tanks, and I don't know what these guys are doing. They look a bit pleasure and pain on these kind of Cenobite machines, but it's got this whole battle gothic feeling to all of their aesthetic, which is really fantastic. Then we've got the Imperium, mankind, wave after wave of men thrown at the battlefield. So we've actually still got Imperial Armies, not the strongest things on the battlefield, but obviously there's quite a few of them. Being human in the future, by the sounds of what's going on in this book, isn't necessarily the best thing in the world. But we've also got Custodians, which are like super high tier Space Marines. And all of this Imperial Guard stuff, look at all these tanks. This really is evocative right across from World War I trench warfare, right to post-World War II designs across all these different tanks. And again, it's just an endless marshalling of armies, which is really cool. And then over here, I think these must be the Custodians, which are even more hardcore than Space Marines. These are the Emperor's finest personal bodyguards, all tooted up in gold. And it keeps going on. We've got the Adeptus Mechanicus. So these guys are all into their machine gods. They still venerate the Emperor, but they do it through a pseudo-religious understanding of him. Say we've got Protestants and Catholics. These guys love the Emperor, but as an omnisire, and they're into their machine stuff, where these warriors who are mortally wounded are just packed into giant mechanical structures that can defend towns and cities. And again, it really is a case of how do you want to pick your battles? How do you want to pick your armies? Do you want to just have these singular hulking machines or waves of men? It's all fantastic. Then we've got like the Eldari, which from a beginner's perspective to me are basically space elves. They have their own factions. They used to be masters of the universe, but they've kind of broken themselves down over the years and they're not really reproducing anymore, and they're sort of an echo of their former glory. And they've obviously got their own dark elf versions called the Drakari, who are quite deep on that whole pleasure-pain vibe. And I vaguely understand these guys have a relationship to Slaanesh, or may actually be directly responsible for some dark gods. So it's all looking beautiful through here. And then we've just got, as a glancing aside, the other aliens. Got some Necrons, we've got some Tau, who, to be honest, looking at what's going on there, visually, they feel distinctly un-Warhammery to me. I don't know why, but they're a bit too clean. Their kind of mech suits remind me of the Tom Cruise Oblivion movie designs. And then we've got a little aside for the Orcs. I loved the Orcs back in the 90s. We're definitely going to have some fun and paint them. So we'll see what's going on with those bad boys. Here we've got them in action. Look at that. Look at those Orc boys in all of their big cloaking armor. We do it for Gork. We do it for Bork. These Tau, can you see what I mean? Super clean techno army with lots of drones and bots. So I'm fascinated to see how they fit in the lore. And then look at these kind of Imhotep style, high-tech Egyptian cursed trawling Necrons. Fantastic. There's an aesthetic for everyone. And then Spawn of the Great Devourer. Tyranids. Tyranids are the most alien of the aliens. They literally feel like the xenomorph. They're pure biologically perfect beings designed to biodegrade an entire planet. So their ecological footprint is actually probably 0 carbon. So if anything, these ones are the most woke out of everyone. And I like the idea that they inject themselves into a planet's bloodline to cause disruption before they kick in. Look at all these guys. So if you just want pure terror on the battlefield, that's something you don't want to be facing. And then it starts to actually dive in terms of this magazine into a bit more about the key characters. So we've had the armies, we've had a breakdown of what the whole thing is and what is the concept of war in the 41st millennium. Now it actually breaks down into telling us a bit about particular battles, particular key characters related to these armies. We've got this guy, Gulliman, head of, the Emperor's right arm, I guess, for all mankind. We've got Abaddon, the Despoiler, who's a bit of a naughty boy and is ruining it for everyone, and is somehow related to Warzone Cadia, which obviously was an influential linchpin planet. And at some point over the last 4 years, I think Games Workshop wrote in that Cadia fell, and this has torn the galaxy in half, which is fascinating. It just means that there's an ongoing narrative happening in the background of all of this as well. Excellent lore if you just want to get a little taste for what's going on. And then it goes into the build and paint section, and then boom, this really rich Necron work again. And this reminds me of the Hyperion novels, where we've got endless waves of the Shrikes coming out of the time tombs. So you kind of get the feeling that these things have come to life and opened up, and it's this endless, dreadnought, relentless march of these zombie cyborg things with plasma weapons. Fascinating. So, a little bit about building your miniatures. Basically start off simple, build up if you're fresh. You're going to get small miniatures with loads of details, or you can do bigger projects like vehicles and so on. You're going to need tools like clippers, brushes, glue, and scrapers for your mold lines. Then a little bit about painting the miniatures as well. And I'm just going to skip across this part because we're going to take a look at these detailed guides for painting Space Marines and Necrons in a future review where we actually take a look at these box sets. I'll open these up and review these and paint with them as well, but we'll do that in just a bit. But then after that as well, it just gives you the opportunity to say, once you're getting used to painting your basic miniatures, you can start to push yourself as a painter and see what else you can achieve and raise your standard, which is really cool. It tries to keep things fairly easy and not give you too much to worry about in the beginning. And then it tells you a bit more about playing games. So this is more of a tactical side of things. You can decide to have very basic games where everyone just turns up with their models and just has a battle and enjoys the experience. Then there's narrative play games where there's a bit more of a role play, an ongoing story and a scenario with tactical points available. And matched play is a bit more about how all of these miniatures are worth a certain amount of points, depending on how effective they are on a battlefield, so that you can kind of have evenly scored armies to rank against each other. And then it just starts to really impress us with what this all looks like on a battlefield. Again, this photograph of real A-tier painted models, all kind of standing off against each other. And I noticed that this whole theme, especially with the models that are being included with a lot of the beginner sets, really are pushing you to either get into Space Marines or get into Necron. And then we've got some guys here who get into a game and they talk about the different abilities of their armies and how they're broken down. The Necrons have an emphasis on durability and resilience alongside overwhelming firepower, with all these special characters over here. The Space Marines are enhanced super soldiers capable of dealing with any danger, so they're very tactical and very flexible. And I just love these commanding characters here, especially these guys in black, which may be chaplains. They just look absolutely awesome. So it goes into this battle, and really they're just kind of talking their way through a battle report, but the whole point of this section is to give you an idea of what an actual game might be like. It's turn-based. You place your armies, you move your armies, you have them fight and attack each other. You might be trying to get tactical positional advantages, you might be trying to take out key characters, and really just see how this kind of battle evolves, which is pretty cool if you genuinely have absolutely no idea. And then it talks about how they wrap up their fights, and then it just gives you an idea of some other things you can buy. There are 3 main box sets which have your starter armies and the full rules. There's a command edition which has a big army and loads of really cool terrain. Then you're basically getting the same thing again in the Elite Edition, but with less terrain and fewer characters. And then there's the Recruit Edition, where you've got just a handful of pieces, some basic bits, but all 3 of these, by the looks of it, give you everything you need to actually understand the rules and get into playing the game if that's what you're in for. And then a little bit right at the back, just advertising some extra cool stuff that you can use to bolster the armies that are in the beginning boxes. Some more heavy Necron stuff, some more mobile attack stuff with the Ultramarines. And that's it for our Warhammer Getting Started book. So yeah, that's what you can be expecting to find in this book. Is it going to be worth it? I think that if you like having tactile things, this really is a lush, lovely starter book, which really does get you in the mood for getting into Warhammer. If you don't know anything about the hobby and you've just heard your friends talking about it and you want a place to start, for 10 quid, it's not too bad. This is actually a pretty good place to get in there. If, however, you're already familiar with the hobby and you want to maybe readdress some old things, what are a few of the newer things that have been coming out in particular and changes to the game since maybe you last were aware of it, then you can probably get away with watching a handful of YouTube videos instead. But this is how Games Workshop are telling us to begin. This is where we are, and we'll be doing some more other beginners sets and reviews further down the line. So make sure that you subscribed if you found this remotely interesting or useful. It is a pleasure to have you. I actually want to hear your thoughts about which armies we're going to be focusing on and painting and taking an interest in as we actually go ahead. So do let me know, and I'll see you next time. Take care. So basically, if you're anything like me and you've been going through these phases of watching Warhammer videos on YouTube on a really big monitor, you slowly start to believe that these things are massive, and you're just like, yeah, I could paint that. I could do some miniatures. And when these turned up and I put them together, I realized that they're tiny. This is going to be really, really difficult. I think I've made a terrible mistake.